Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It is Friday, Self Validation Friday. Self Validation Friday, you guys. Good morning. Good morning. Are you ready for today's conversation? Good morning. It is Self Validating Friday. Good morning. Self Validating Friday. Today's conversation is all about uh, the voice in your head. The voice in your head. The voice in your head. Is it a friend or foe? Is it a friend or foe? Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Listen, I hope that we have gotten ourselves together in our personal life, right? We've gotten ourselves together personally. Um, Now we're going to collect as a community, wrap this week up. This week we're talking about how to heal, right? This is all has to do with the Shape Your Life in March, right? Celebrating really a Women's History Month, but history altogether, right? How to really create new legacy, right? For ourselves. So we're shaping our life. Last week we talked about self-awareness. This week we're talking about healing as a part of shaping our life. Last week we talked about self-awareness as a huge part of shaping your life. This week we're talking about healing as a huge part of shaping your life. And then I just want to make sure my camera is together. And then next week we talk about accountability. But we're wrapping up this week, you guys. It's Friday. We're here. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Let me get us disclaimer. Let me get us disclaimer. This session is designed to really help you identify and understand the impact of the inner critic. But this session is designed to help you identify and understand the impact of the inner critic. But the real transformation happens when you take intentional action, right? When you take intentional action. Healing isn't about silencing the inner critic, you guys. It's not about silencing this inner critic. It's about learning how to challenge and reframe its voice. If you're serious about building self-validation, um, if you're serious about building self-validation, you guys, be willing to do the inner work. Seek the guidance, support, and accountability uh, that would align with your growth. Listen, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. We are back at Life Lessons with Dr. Sheila Little. If you're new here, I am Dr. Sheila Little, a clinical therapist for 20 years. This is a part of our Project Life series. Project Life is an initiative where we do what? We turn theory into practice. We turn theory into practice, right? We hear so much theory. We hear so many people saying stuff. And how do we make that practical for our own life? Okay. Um, so let's take our deep breath. Let's take our deep breath. Get present in the body, right? Get focused, right? Feel our feet on the floor, feel our legs, right? Feel our butt on the seats if we're at work, feel ourselves in the bed, right? Our bodies in the bed if we're laying down, right? Feel our feet on the floor, our legs, you know, feel our stomachs fill up, right? Our chest, our backs, our arms. These are very present, right? Our face, right? We're just gonna get present. We're gonna breathe in self-trust, you guys. Just breathe in. And then breathe out self-doubt. And then we're gonna breathe in self-presence. Self-trust. And then we're going to breathe out self-doubt, you guys. Good morning. Good morning. Before we start, drop a word in the chat. Drop a word in the chat. How are you feeling this self-validation morning? I'm feeling accomplished today. Okay. I'm wrapping up the 6th week of Project Life. Excited about what's to come with this initiative. I'm wrapping up the 6th week of life lessons. I am excited about what can happen with Project Life. I thank everybody who has invited, who has engaged. So there's a sense of accomplishment. All right. There's a sense of accomplishment. Just drop a word in the chat and let me know how you're feeling this morning. How are you feeling this morning? Okay. So this week we explored the stories we tell ourselves, right? On Monday, we talked about, on Monday, this week we explored the stories we tell ourselves on Monday. And then on Tuesdays, the triggers that arise when we choose to heal, right? And then on Wednesday we talked about the obstacles that really keep us stuck. Good morning, Miss Jackie, right? And then the patterns, right? The patterns that we repeat on Thursday. And then today we're going to tackle this inner critic, right? The loudest voice keeping us from self-validating, right? From self-validation. If you ever doubted yourself, struggle with negative self-talk, or felt like you weren't good enough, like, listen, this session is for you. This session is really called, listen, what was it called? The who told you that? Who told you that, right? The voice in your head, is it your friend or foe, right? Who told you that? Pep said he's feeling considerate. Good morning, Pep. All right. So who is this session for? Individuals who really struggle with self-doubt, perfectionism, and imposter syndrome. Those who find themselves seeking external validation instead of trusting themselves. People who really recognize their inner critic but don't know how to really shift that voice, right? And then the faith-based individuals who want to align their self-worth, right, with divine truth. Okay, with divine truth. All right. All right. So our powerful quote for today, like, you've been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving yourself and see what happens. Our powerful quote for today is, you've been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving yourself and see what happens. I love that quote. I love that quote, right? Because how much of this is true? We've been doing the same thing for years. We've been criticizing ourselves, putting ourselves down, and it ain't working, right? So how about we start approving ourselves and see what happens? That is by Louise Hay. All right. So Lisa was an ambitious and hardworking woman who I worked with. But no matter how much she accomplished, she always felt like she was falling short. Her inner critic constantly told her she could have done better, right? She was not good. She was not good as her colleagues, or not good as her friends, or not good as her other family members, and not even good as her siblings, right? Even whenever she tried to do something, her inner critic would tell her, whenever you try, you would just fail, right? Even when people praised her, she just didn't believe it, right? You remember when I said that if you don't believe it, 1,000 people can tell you you're beautiful, you can sing, you're attractive, you're amazing, right? But if you don't believe it, right? If you don't believe it, then guess what? It's going to be hard for you to receive that. So even when people would praise Lisa, guess what? She didn't believe it, right? Lisa didn't realize that her biggest obstacle wasn't her lack of ability, you guys. It wasn't her lack of ability. It was her inability to validate herself, right? It was her inability to validate herself. Her story connected back to this lesson from her story connects back to the lessons from this week, you guys. Like, on her story was that Lisa believed that she had to be perfect, right, to be worthy, right? And then the triggers, like we talked about on Tuesday, any form of criticism just triggered shame, guilt, or failure in her, right? The obstacles that she faced as a consequence of that was fear of not being good enough, not showing up enough, right? Which held her back from opportunities, right? And then the pattern that she found herself in was that she realized that her inner critic is a learned voice from her childhood. And so she had to rewrite it. All right. All right. So have you ever noticed a pattern of self-doubt, right? And where do you think that came from, right? Because this is how the inner critic really shows up. It really shows up in our perfectionism. Good morning, Mariah. It really shows up in our perfectionism, right? If I'm not the best, I'm not worthy. It shows up in us over apologizing, right? I must always prove I'm good enough, right? It shows up in our fear of failure. If I fail, I'll be judged. It shows up in our seeking external validation. I need others to tell me what to do. I need my friends to help me navigate through this, right? Because my voice isn't enough. My opinion isn't enough. I really don't trust myself enough, right? And it shows up in our comparison traps, right? I'll never be good as them, right? They'll always be better than me. They've done more than me, right? Listen, this inner critic isn't the real you guys. I really want you to know this. This inner critic isn't the real you. It's a conditioned voice based on old fears. And we're going to talk about this more because I think it's important that once we realize what the inner critic's role is, I think that we'll start to befriend it. We'll start to befriend this thing that once served as a foe for us. Okay. The inner critic isn't the inner critic isn't uh the inner critic isn't the real you guys. It's a conditioned voice based on your old fears. This means you don't have to believe everything it says, you guys. You can retrain it. Imagine finally being free from your self-doubt and trusting yourself. Okay. What if self-validation is the missing piece of your confidence? Listen, I worked with someone who never felt good enough. Once she recognized her inner critic was repeating her childhood fears, guess what? She learned how to reframe those thoughts, and now she can validate herself instead of seeking approval from others. Listen, I told you, studies show that neuroplasticity shows that the brain can rewire these negative thought patterns when we actively challenge them, you guys. So are you ready to really change this dialogue? If you are, I want you to put a light bulb in the chat for me today. I want you to put a light bulb in the chat because I do want to talk about the kind of difference between our inner critic and our self-talk. Okay. And then this intuitive God voice, because I think that, if we don't know how to distinguish the difference between the roles that the voices in our heads play, I think it will continue to contribute to our inner critic. So I'm going to kind of pause and talk about intuitively, right? So when I ask myself a question, right? Because remember, by design, I was created the way God created me was for my brain to deliver me answers, right? So intuitively, if I ask myself a question, breathe, get present, then I can hear an answer come up. And a lot of times we're not hearing the answer or trusting that answer because either we're thinking that's our inner critic or that's our self-talk. Like we're not really trusting that voice. Okay. So that is one voice. That is our instinct, right? And really that first voice that's coming up or that first answer is more than likely our instinct, right? So if I say, how am I feeling today? I take a deep breath and then I hear that voice. That's probably that's the one I should choose. Okay. Now our inner critic though, which we're going to talk more about, is our defense mechanism. Okay. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to pin that. That's our defense mechanism. Our self-talk though is our manual seat. That's the manual me. That's me having a conscious conversation in my head back to either my intuitive voice, having a conscious conversation back to the inner critic and shutting it down, me having a conscious conversation, with God, asking questions. So that is me consciously having like this outside conversation that I'm having. That's me, my self-talk, having this conscious conversation inside of my head. Okay. If that makes sense, put a 1 in the chat because there is this variation of, I guess I would say me's right inside our head. And that's okay. It's okay because they all serve a purpose. It's like the difference between, I, me, and we, right? All of those I, me, and we serve, um, they're all variations of me, but when I put them in, I use them differently in sentences, right? So me would be a collective, right? Me would be in a sentence when I'm comparing myself with somebody else, and I would be more singular, right? So my self-talk is the I. That's me. That's the me, right? In this conversation. So if we can look at it like that, right, then we can understand that, okay, I do have control because I can have a conversation with this inner critic, shut it down or partner with it, right? I can ask myself questions, right? And get an intuitive answer. And then there is space for God to what? Speak to me, right? And I can have a conversation with that. So that's our self-talk. So I don't want us to get the inner critic mixed up with that. Okay. Right. If that makes sense, put a 2 in the chat. Okay. So we know that the I in the stop and now framework stands for the inner critic, right? Or this it factor, right? The inner critic. And the it factor stands for that. The I stands for inner critic and the T stands for self-talk. Okay. The inner critic is the voice that really shapes how we see ourselves, and the limits our healing, and our self-talk is the things we talk to ourselves about. Okay. So this inner critic often is referred to as our inner voice, right? It's the internal dialogue that judges, demeans, and undermines our self-worth. This perceived self-criticism can significantly hinder our ability to grow, right? To heal, okay? To grow and heal. Why does this inner critic exist? Because this got curious to me when I really dug into it. I'm like, well, why does this inner critic even exist, God? Right? Because I'm just wondering, why do I have to even manage something like this? Why? You know what I mean? What this is this my job? You know? Okay. So listen, the brain, right, created the inner critic to really keep you safe from rejection and failure. All right. The brain created the inner critic to really keep you safe from rejection and failure. All right. It's a defense mechanism. It's a defense mechanism. All right. But in adults, it often holds us back. Right. But we can retrain the brain to shift the criticism to self-compassion. We can train our brain to shift this criticism to self-compassion, right? How to recognize when this inner critic is speaking. It uses like absolute language. Remember we talked about distortions yesterday, and we talked about generalizations, right? So this inner critic is going to use language like always, never, not good enough, right? It's going to use absolute language. It mimics like the voices of our parents, right? Our teachers in society, right? And it makes us feel small, unworthy, and fearful to really take action, right? It kind of make us feel alone in this world, all right? The inner critic is one of the biggest obstacles in our healing process, because it keeps us attached to our old wounds. It whispers, right? It whispers to us, or sometimes even shouts the limiting beliefs we have absorbed from our past experiences, really telling us that we're not good enough, we're not worthy enough, or incapable of change. But the truth is, healing isn't about getting rid of this inner critic, you guys. It's about learning how to manage it so that it no longer really runs the show. All right. So that it no longer runs the show. All right. Why is the inner critic showing up, during our healing process? The inner critic isn't actually trying to harm us. So it's not showing up during our healing process to harm us, you guys. It's really trying to protect us. All right. Right. Remember, it's a defense mechanism. So it's keeping us safe from rejection, right? From failure and from emotional pain. But in healing, remember, this is what we have to go through, right? So we have to go through rejection. What are we rejecting? We're rejecting our old self, our old behaviors, our old patterns, right? So we have to go through that, right? We're embracing failure. We know that we're on a learning curve. So on this learning curve, we know that we don't know everything, and we're going to get it wrong sometimes, right? And so we're embracing failure. So this inner critic is used to like perfectionism and not getting it wrong. So, but when we heal, we understand that life is about lessons. And so I can get it wrong, but the inner critic shows up to be like, right? And then emotional pain. It's trying to keep us safe from emotional pain. But remember, in our healing pattern, we're feeling that. We're feeling that pain. We're no longer numb anymore. We're no longer running away, right? So in healing, it's really trying to protect us, but this inner critic could now be holding us back, right? it could now be holding us back. Because listen, if you grew up in an environment where expressing emotions led to punishment or dismissal, your inner critic might have said to you, right? Stop being so sensitive. No one wants to hear about your pain, right? So your inner critic, if you grew up in an environment by design, God created an inner critic in you to start to whisper things in your ear so that you can what? So that you can um have some, what's the word I'm looking for? So you can have some, so you can persevere that environment, right? So you can get through that. So now so now this inner critic is developed, or this voice has developed so that you can be able to get through the thing that you got through, right? So if you grew up in an environment where expressing your emotions led to punishment and dismissal, and you got punished and dismissed so much, you would develop this voice, because guess what? That's painful, that's rejectful, that's I feel this way. So this voice will start to say, listen, don't say that. Right. Stop being so sensitive. We don't need to say that. No one wants to hear that, right? And it started to do that so that what? So you won't get on punishment. So you don't have to feel that dismissal from other people, right? If you are going through betrayal or abandonment, right, your inner critic might say, or might have started to say to you, don't trust anyone, right? They'll just hurt you again, right? Because the inner critic was developed to help you persevere, right? To help you become more resolute, right? To help you really get through this difficult time. So you really wanted to lean in on this environment to provide you with what? Safety, connection, love, and support. But a lot of times in our environments, that couldn't happen. Because that couldn't happen, then our minds naturally created a defense mechanism to kind of, in a way, create boundaries so that we won't have to get in trouble, get that whooping, get on punishment, feel that pain. Listen, I'm finna share something. I remember the first time I heard my inner critic. I remember it vividly. I was being molested when I was about 9 or 10 years old. I was being molested by a family friend's boyfriend. And the inner critic kind of nudged me to tell, right? So the inner critic is like, go tell, you need to go tell, you need to go talk about that, right? So I didn't geek myself up to go tell. So I go in the room and I go to this family member and I say, tell this family member, hey, such and such has been touching me, right? And it's kind of like you ever saw that scene in the movie where everything kind of pushed back and like come forward, and the family member kind of looked at me, and the family member kind of like said, get the F out my face. Like, look me dead in my face. I'm like 9 or 10 years old. And they looked me dead in my face and were like, get the fuck up, get the F out my face, right? When they said that, I remember walking out the room. Good morning. Good morning. I remember walking out the room, and I distinctly remember hearing my inner critic say, it's just me and you now. We can't trust anybody, right? I remember that to this day. And then I walked out the room, I walked up the step, and my inner critic and I made a plan of how we were going to make it through life. Okay, so that means you got to go to school. That means you got to do this. I distinctively remember that moment. And I know, because that rejection, that, in sharing that and being vulnerable to share this, thing that was happening to me, like I'm being molested, I'm going to go tell to get protection, right? And to feel that level of rejection, I really feel like my body, our minds are not really created for that. So by design, God created this voice to kind of come in and like, you're going to be okay. We're going to make it through this. Guess what? You're going to be okay. It's just me and you now. And like I said, I'm like 10 or 11 years old. So by 12, I had started making money, right? I had, by design, teach me how to do hair, teach me how to really manage my life, right? So I had to become an adult very early because this inner critic had developed, right? If that makes sense, put a 3 in the chat, right? And if you can remember the time where your inner critic really developed as a defense mechanism. Now, if we can see it like that, right? Now, guess what? Throughout my younger years, that defense mechanism or that inner critic served a purpose. So it was helping me navigate, like, oh, don't talk to them in that environment that I was living in, right? Don't talk to them. Don't do this. Don't ask that. And guess what? Because when it first developed, thank you, Ms. Jackie, because when it first developed, because the outside because of the outside environment wasn't supporting me, guess what I started to trust? That voice in my head. Right now, mind you, at that stage already in our life, chemically is the time where we start to, just say, in our teenage years. So when we are from, like, not from birth to 7 or 8 years old, we're just collecting information. Like, we're not really believing it. But when we start to change chemically, that means when our hormones start to kick in, puberty starts to kick in, things like that. This is when we start to make things real, right? So, I really, I was hearing this stuff about daddy when I was like younger, or I was hearing this stuff, but like now I'm a teenager and now it's like all of it, I'm making it real. And the reason, a big part of that is because of this inner critic too, right? Because the inner critic is saying, see, yep, you remember that happened before. Yep, see, right? And it really becomes this defensive mechanism and it kind of becomes your friend, right? During that time, you're getting bullied at school. It's kind of helping you navigate, right? It's kind of telling you, don't talk to them. Do this. It's kind of, oh, don't go down that street. You know what I mean? Right. So it's really not there to hold you back. It was really there to protect you in these very volatile environments when you grew up, so that you can make it today to be talking right here in Project Life, or so that you can make it to be having a job that you had or have the kids you had. Because if you didn't have that mechanism, right, if that voice didn't come up in me when I said that thing to that family member, right, if that didn't raise up in me to catch me in that fall, I don't know what would have happened. Like, I was like, what is going on? But I could hear that voice once send me in a room and say, yep, we're gonna go do this. I'm like, I'm gonna say it, and I'm like, I would just clearly remember it, right? And then, like, walking out, I can remember it, just like, okay, it's just me and you now. This is, I mean, not verbatim, but in so many words, it's like, okay, we got to figure how we gonna make it, and from then on, I listened to it. All right. Now, let's move on to me being an adult woman. Now I'm an adult. I'm not in that environment anymore. Right? I'm not around those type of people anymore. I want more for myself. But guess what? This inner critic in my mind, I'm still in relationship with it. So guess what it's saying? Oh, don't talk to them. Right. Because now I've taught it to keep me safe. I've allowed it to keep me, in a sense, in this safe space, right? Just keep me comfortable. So now I go off to college, and now it's new people that I can meet, and the inner critic is treating these new people like the abuser. You know what I mean? Like the environment that I came from. And in the beginning, I trusted it, but then I realized, oh, no, we can't do that, right? We can't listen to the thoughts in our head. In some way, now I have to go into manual gear. Okay. Now, mind you, it's more to that, but in essence, that's the part that the inner critic is playing, right? Right. It's really there. So like I say, if you've been betrayed or abandoned, this inner critic may tell you at a young age, don't trust anyone. They'll just try to hurt you again, right? The problem is the inner critic, right, isn't based in the present reality. It's really rooted in your past, right? So the inner critic interferes with our healing because it's really keeping us stuck in self-doubt, right? So you'll never change. And here's the other part. Because the inner critic can only collect the information that it's been given, right? So then it starts to mimic voices around you, right? So, I remember my mom at 17 said to me that I would never find a husband because I was so focused on making money and like taking care of my family. And I had really became a very masculine in my in this doer stage. And I was like, I ain't cleaning up. Listen, I am not domesticated. I ain't washing the dish. And she was like, I don't know how you're going to find a husband, right? Now, mind you, at that time, I'm kind of more brass, right? So it's just like, how I'm going to find him, right? Now, when I got older and, I'm trying to date, guess what? That inner critic picked up my mom's language and was like, see, you see, your mom, your mom said this is why it's going to be hard for you to see. And that's how the inner critic works. So now as an adult, it's going back and picking up these things, right? To what? To keep me safe, to keep me single because I'm comfortable as a single woman, to keep me at this job because I'm comfortable in this job, to keep me at this level of degree because I'm comfortable at this level of degree. So it's going to go back and pick up whatever it needs to pick up in the language and the people and the circumstance. Although in that moment I was very rejective to what my mom said, like when I started to date and open myself up, right? The inner critic's like, no. Remember your mama said that, and pulled that in, which is something when I started to heal that I had to wrestle with. If that made sense, put a 4 in the chat. Not to really tell a lot about my life story, but I just really want to give you guys examples so you can see like how sophisticated one, how unique we are by design, how beautifully we're designed. But when there's I'll say like a I don't even want to say like an issue because like I said, at the time that inner critic was introduced to me, it saved my life and it saved yours too, right? And it's kind of like one of those things where, okay, thank you for getting me here. Thank you for getting me here. But now I got to change my relationship with you. Like, thank you for being my ride or die. Thank you for being able to shoot everybody down for me. Right. But now I need you to, we ain't trying to kill everybody now. Right. We trying to be their friend. Right. So now I got to go back in a sense, like reprogram how this inner critic functions with me. Because at first it was like the pew, 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 we gonna shoot everybody. You know what I mean? This is a defense mechanism. And then it's our job to go back and say, we don't gotta kill everybody. We don't have to do that. Okay. All right. So the inner critic keeps us in self-doubt. It makes us fear vulnerability, right? If you open up, people will judge you, right? It pressures you to heal, right? Perfectly. If you're not healing perfectly, right? You wouldn't feel this way. If you were really healing, you wouldn't feel this way. That's somewhat of whispers that I say. It uses guilt and shame, right? So the stuff that it has collected about you from the past, right? You should be over that by now, right? This stuff you've heard, it will use that to really keep you from healing, all right? And it stops you from really asking for help. Okay. The pain isn't serious enough that you need support, right? Because what it knows is that once other words and people come in, that it has no leverage anymore. It's kind of like, I don't want to say like the abusive boyfriend, but in a sense, right? It understands that the more information and the more support you get, right, it has limited leverage. Okay. Good morning, Miss Melissa. Right. Good morning, Miss Sharon. Good morning, Miss Cynthia. All right. All right. Good morning, brother. Okay, so I really want us to look at this inner critic differently. Like, oh, okay, so it's not really here to hurt me. It's just hurting me now. But when it developed in me, it actually was developing as a defense mechanism to really help me, right? Because if we don't recognize that, it will keep us stuck in our negative beliefs, right? It will keep you telling yourself that you're not enough and you don't deserve healing, right? And how we would shift that, and how to shift that part is, start talking to it like it's your friend, or start speaking to yourself like your friend. Remember, I told you, so we have our self-talk, we have our inner critic. So when we hear that inner critic come up, we're going to speak to it like it's our friend, because we're modeling for it now how we want it to behave, right? We're going to challenge that the negative thoughts with self-compassion, right? if we don't understand this inner critic and start to really work with it, it will sabotage our progress, right? What happens is that just as you start healing, right, this doubt will start to creep in, and we'll say stuff to ourselves like, "This won't last. You tried this last year, right? Here we go again. How long you think this gonna last this time, right?" I remember one time going on one of my health things, and I started like taking my vitamins and taking my shakes and all of that. And I specifically heard my inner critic say, "We gotta do this every day." Like, and I'm like, yeah, we gotta do it every day, right? And it ain't even, I mean, I drink coffee every day. I've never heard that voice come in and say to me, "We gotta drink coffee every day." No. But when I started to make my green shakes and, do all of that, I distinctly heard like, "We gotta do this every day." And I'm like, yeah, but guess what? It came in strong too. And a big part of that is because it knew me drinking these green shakes, me taking these vitamins every day was going to what? Change my energy level, change how I show up, right? And so it made it said it in a way like it was weird, like, ugh, we don't want to do this every day. And and I talked about that um, with my coach and everything, and really like unpack that, like, why do I feel that way? But this is again, right? When the healing starts, this voices start to creep in. And so I just had like a talk back to it, like, yeah, we're going to do this every day. We don't say that about our coffee, right? And we're not going to say this about our green drink. And since then, I do my green drinks every day, right? Right. And so here's the thing. When doubt shows up, we want to pause, and then we want to remind ourselves of why we started. We don't really want to judge that voice, right? Because we know now why it's there. Okay. It's there to protect the current you that you are. It's not there to support the person that you're trying to become. Right. And that's why we can't take it personal. Right. That's why we really can't take people personal, you guys. When we start to go on our healing journey, we really can't take people personal, because they mad because they're trying to preserve the person you are now. They don't know this person you're trying to become. And so you may feel some rejection or some, or some even some emotional resistance from them. And it's only because they're just trying to keep you how you are today, because that's serving a purpose for them, right? And if you go change, that's firing uh red flags in them, the way your brain is responding to the change that you want, but maybe even at a higher magnitude in them, because they like, wait, hold on, what is going on? So their fear of your change is real, right? Just like your brain's fear of your change is real. So that's why we can't really judge them. We can just explain and be friendly and say, okay, I understand. I can understand why you're scared, right? And so in this inner critic, it's the same way, right? We want to not judge it. We just want to respond, right? With compassion, right? When it tries to sabotage our progress. All right. It can create overwhelm and anxiety in us, you guys. So what will happen is that when healing starts to feel too big, right? Too hard and too much, right? This inner critic can make, right? Our healing feel too big, too hard, too much, which is again why we have to do what? Get present, take small daily steps, right? A lot of us are trying to, because we have a narrative that, I'm 45, I'm behind the pace, I should be further along. We're trying to go, in these watermelon trucks, these watermelon chunks, right? These big spaces. And it's like, no, we're going to take small daily actions, right? We'll get there, because once we get there, we're there. You know what I mean? But a lot of us are trying to do too much, like just do too much, because we're trying to play catch up. And it's like, no, we're just gonna, we're gonna take small. So we're gonna break our healing down into small steps, right? We're gonna focus on our progress, not perfection, right? This will help us to befriend our inner critic, right? Versus overwhelming it with these big changes. All right. It will make you hide from your true self, right? You fear judgment, so you will hold back your emotions and your needs, right? Expressing yourself. So the way we can shift that is that we can start expressing ourselves, like, even in music, whenever I am. So I don't know if y'all watch Wicked. Like, I literally watch Wicked every day. Like, literally, it's playing in the background while I'm watching the soundtrack about defying gravity or meeting a wizard. But I'm always finding a way that when I am going through a challenging moment, that either a song is in the background playing that I can dance to. Like, if I can't really articulate it in words, like, I have this bigger dream. And so for me, defying gravity is like that thing for me that, I'm like, yeah, I'm defying gravity or wicked, like, so I'm always introducing myself to art or design or some type of way that's helping that expression being expressed to me. So now I don't have to speak it out my mouth or really be in my head with it. And it's a way to really bypass this inner critic. So again, music, using dance, using journaling, right? And speaking up for ourselves, right? When we find ourselves trying to hide, all right? When we find ourselves trying to hide, it lowers our resilience, right? That's the word I was looking for, you guys. Resilience, right? It helps us to be more resilient, all right? When we were younger, all right? Lowering your resilience. When things get hard, your inner critic will say, see, you couldn't do this, right? What we know as adults is that failure is a part of life, right? So it's not that I can't do this. It's that I need to learn something else before I can do this. Let's say that again. It's not that I can't do this. It's that I need to learn something before I can do this, or I need to learn something else before I can do that. So what we want to do is keep a wins journal, right? And really, I know people who have lists, you guys, like list of 20, 30, 40 things that they want to accomplish today. You heard what I said today. Like, I got 40 things I want to accomplish today. And I'm like, yeah, see, now you're in that case, you're actually fueling the inner critic, because what everything in your intelligence knows is if that 40 things ain't 40 steps from to, steps, like the steps you're going to take from, like, literal steps, then it's impossible, right? To complete these 40 tasks with proficiency, right? So what we want to do is we want to have a wins list. We want to be able to really check, okay, I got the clothes washed. I did the dishes. I did this. So we can have the list of 40, but we want to go and we want to check off the things we did. So if we did 10 of those things, if we did 15 of those things, if so happen you did 40, right? You're eating the list up. Okay. And we want to see that so that when that inner critic comes and tell you that, you can't do this, you can go back and show everything that you've done. Right. So we want to get a wins journal or something like that. And Mariah and I work together in Shape of Solutions. And she knows, like, I will literally list everything out detail by detail. And I'm like checking stuff off. And sometimes it has taken me 2 years to check something off. But by the time I check it off, it's like, oh, we got that off the board. Right. And so sometimes our minds really need that checklist, you guys. We're trying to keep an invisible inventory. And a lot of us are not feeling accomplished. A lot of us are not feeling healed. A lot of us not feeling like we're moving forward because we don't have a measuring stick, because we're not keeping a measuring tool for ourselves. You know what I mean? Because we don't know what we've accomplished, and we've accomplished so much, in one day. And we're not even giving ourselves the benefit of it because we're not keeping track of those things. And so it seems like this insatiable bottom where I gotta keep doing over and over and over and over again. Okay. All right. If the imposter syndrome, right? I'm afraid, I'm a fraud, right? I really don't deserve to healing or success, right? It blocks our self-compassion. This imposter syndrome, we want to acknowledge our progress. Okay. It blocks our self-compassion, right? So this inner critic really tells you that you're lazy, you're selfish, you're and that's unnecessary, or what you're doing is unnecessary, right? We just want to remind ourselves that self-compassion really, we want to remind ourselves that self-compassion is the relationship that we're starting to build, and it really fuels our healing, not makes us weak. All right. And I do feel like when we start to really integrate self-compassion within us, in some way we start to feel more guilty, because it's as if we are allowing ourselves to show up differently than what we've shown up. So if I didn't make the mark and I have compassion for myself, it's as if that voice is going to tell me, oh, you just making an excuse. And it's not that I'm making an excuse. It's that because this is now where I know what my intention is. I know my intention was to do 100%. I only got 70. I'm going to give myself self-compassion for that 70 because I know what my intention was from the jump, right? And this is where we start trusting how we show up, right? So that when that voice comes, I'm trusting me. I'm trusting me in that. If that makes sense, put a 5 in the chat, right? So it pushes you towards a perfectionism again. If you can't heal perfectly, why even do it? We already talked about that. Listen, we have to learn, let ourselves learn. We have to make mistakes, and now all of that is a part of the growing up process, or the growing and developing process, right? Healing is not linear. It's an ascension process. We're going to go up. We're going to go down. We're going to go up. We're going to go down, right? That is just life. It's not about that. What we want to do is make sure we ascending. So I'm going to go up. I'm going to drop a little bit. I'm not going to drop back to where I was. And even if so happen, I happen to drop back where I was. And even if I so happen to drop below where I was, I always say, oh, so you in a slingshot, right? Because sometimes I have to go into a slingshot position. Do y'all know what a slingshot position is? I say I put myself in slingshot positions. A slingshot is where I'm intentionally pulling myself back. I'm intentionally going below where I was before. Because I know when that resistance, all of that I'm feeling, when I let go, when I launch, guess what? The momentum that I'm going to have when I let go is going to take me further than just the regular up and down. And so a lot of times, especially in this last 10 years, I've definitely been in slingshot positions, building a business. That's a slingshot position because I definitely got to take some steps back, minimize, anybody who's an entrepreneur knows that. Sometimes getting in a relationship can be a slingshot position, right? Because now I was working as an individual, but I had to kind of halt myself to kind of learn this other person before I move forward, before we move forward collectively. Maybe getting this new job and this promotion could have seemed like a slingshot because I had to move and now I had to make these new friends, right? But the position itself positioned me for something better in the future, right? So these slingshot positions could seem like, hey, I'm dipping below what I'm used to, but actually it's going to launch me a lot further, right? And then, just the asking for help, you guys, comparing ourselves to others and asking for help. Listen, this inner critic will really fuel us and really get in our minds about comparing ourselves to others. They're healing faster than me. They're better than me, especially like if you're in a slingshot position, especially if you are in one of those winter seasons or fall seasons and you're looking at somebody who's in their, summer, when you're in a winter season or fall, and you're looking at somebody who's in their summer, right? And their spring and summer season, right? That could be, the inner critic can use that as fuel, but we want to live at our own pace again. Layup, if y'all haven't heard of that, Layup, a great, he sells apparel, but the tagline is Layup, live at your own pace. And when we could stay at our own lane, right, healing becomes a personal journey, like not a race. All right. And then we just got to start asking for help. This inner critic will really make us feel like we're alone. Nobody can help us. Nobody understands us. Nobody understands our journey. Nobody can, right? It really wants to isolate us and really make us feel this way. Why? Because that is what worked. That is what worked, you guys. That is what worked when we were younger, right? But we are adults now and we need community, right? Research shows that community, the way the neurons fire, the way we accelerate, even the Bible says we're two or more gathered, right? So we want to be in community, right? To accelerate our process, to multiply. All right. So this inner critic has isolated you so you can be resilient, so that you can get through as a defense mechanism. But now we want to go back into community. So we want to definitely get the help that we need. Okay. Listen, The inner critic, instead of trying to eliminate the inner critic, really the goal is to stop identifying with it, you guys, to identify that that's not you, that's your inner critic, that was your defensive mechanism to honor, to in a sense, thank it, right? Like, I thank you for getting me here, because a part of that defense mechanism is truly what got you here. It's the thing that told you don't listen to them or don't do this, right? So instead of trying to eliminate this inner critic, right, the goal is to really stop trying to identify with it. You're not the inner critic. All right. You are the observer of the inner critic. All right. So we want to notice the voice, separate yourself from it. Oh, right? That's that old belief again, right? We want to challenge it, right? Is this real? Is this really true? Where did this come from, right? And then we want to speak back in compassion, you guys. Replace it with new, empowering truth, right? Yeah, that was true when I was 15. That's just not true anymore. All right. Um. So what if instead of seeing this inner critic, Pep said, yep, adults need community. Yes, as adults, we need community. And we have bought we have been told this thing that we don't need community, that isolation is good. And that's just not true, right? We need community. We need to solitude sometimes, right? But we also need community. All right. What if instead of seeing the inner critic as our enemy, you guys, we saw it as the wounded part of ourselves that needed healing? What if we saw the inner critic as the wounded part of ourselves that needed healing? The inner critic is often just the old version of us, right? Scared, hurt, and needs reassurance, right? The scared, hurt part of us that needs reassurance. The part of us that stood up. If you think about, you watched any super what is they called, Superman movies, or you know what I mean, and you know Avengers, that's my favorite movie. That's another one I'll watch, right? And you remember Infinity War, right, where I mean, Captain America was beat down, you know what I mean, like, in a sense, defending what? America, right? So you are the person um that your inner critic has defended, right? Protected, provided for. And it's just, like this wounded part of you. All these years it had to really fight and defend you. If we saw it as vulnerable like that, and if we saw it like it's really just this trying to defend and protect you, right? Then we probably wouldn't want to be as scared of it. We would have more empathy for it, right? And we would be like, I'm good. I'm an adult now. I can take care of me. You don't have to keep fighting, right? Healing means showing up for yourself in ways that no one did before, right? With patience, kindness, and the belief of growth, right? So your inner critic doesn't get to define who you are, you guys. It's just an outdated voice trying to keep you in a familiar pattern. But you are evolved now, right? And in healing, right? Healing is proof that you are no longer who you used to be, right? You're sitting here right now because you are the evolved part of you, right? Now you may be struggling with this inner critic. There may be some issues going on with this inner critic, but I want you to know that that inner voice literally got you here, but it won't take you there. And so we got to build a different relationship with it, right? It because it was your friend back then and it's becoming your foe now. And so we have to now change our relationship with it. And this is not about kicking it or, putting it down or judging it, or, it's not about that. It's about really embracing it and speaking to it gently, right? And not calling it stupid and dumb and why are you here? And I don't know why all these voices be happening in my head. Like, no, we're going to speak to it in a gentle way. All right. All right. If that makes sense, put a 6 in the chat, right? Because and then I want you to ask yourself, what's one belief your inner critic tells you? And then how can you reframe that? All right. All right. And then when was the last time your inner critic stopped you from doing something that you really wanted to do? All right. And then we're going to go into our biblical wisdom. So our biblical wisdom today is 2 Corinthians 10 and 5. All right. And this is about reclaiming your worth in God. So 2 Corinthians 10 and 5. We demolish arguments, and even pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought that comes against its obedience. Let me make this big. Yeah, no, I can. All right. So we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ, right? So not every thought that enters your mind, you guys, is true or aligned with who you are and who you were created to be. Okay. So not every thought that enters into your mind is true or aligned with who you are in your relationship with Christ, in your relationship with yourself, in the relationship that you're becoming. All right. You have the power to challenge and redirect negative thoughts instead of allowing them to shape your identity, right? So we demolish arguments in every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, right? Right. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ, right? And we know that God is what? The creator of all things, right? The and I love that because when we think about God as being the creator and creating the rules, right? And anything that goes against, like I know that this thing called gravity. Again, I just want to say, I ain't no preacher. Okay. So I'm not trying to be no preacher. I really just feel like there's some principles about God that we have to recognize as any being on earth, no matter our religion. So this thing called gravity. Like if I drop this mouse, it's going to fall. No one can speak against that. No one can get me to believe anything different because that's law, right? That is law, right? I know that as the sun goes up, as the sun comes up, right, and the moon goes down, like I know that the sky is blue, right? It's just universal laws that you can't get me to to question. Okay. Now, if we knew the knowledge of God like that, if we knew that about ourselves, if we knew that about the word, like if we knew that, just say like a word of God is that I am um powerful beyond measure, right? Beautifully and wonderfully made. If I knew that and I believe that, like I know that this thing gonna drop when I drop it out of my hand, how different would life be, right? Right. So we diminish argument, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself against the knowledge of God, right? This knowing of God, this is a principle. Anything that I know that God knows, any promise, anything like that, like like I'm gonna be against that and then take captive every thought to make it obedient. Like now I can take captive all of these thoughts, all of these, the inner critic, the thoughts of my mom, the thoughts of my old boyfriend, I can take them captive and make them obedient to believe this, that when this drop, yeah, when I let this go, it's gonna drop, even in their unbelief. Okay, that's the power we have, you guys. I hope that made sense, right? Right. We can take captive every thought and make it obedient and to the Christ in us. We can make it align in that when we believe it, when we believe it, when we know the knowledge of God, when we know the person that God has built in us, the seeds, the desires, the intelligence, the power, the authority that we have as human beings, then we can take captive every thought and make it obedient to the Christ that lives in us. That is the dominion that God gave us, you guys. Okay. So this verse teaches us that not every thought that enters our mind is true, right? And or should be believed, right? That this inner critic really thrives on fear. It thrives on us not knowing that we have that authority. It thrives on us not knowing, right? That I got the power. That when I heard that inner critic say to me, we gotta drink this every day. And I could have looked at that green drink like, I know. Like, ugh, who want to do that? But I knew at that point I had authority because I drink coffee every day. I drink water every day. You know what I mean? That inner critic ain't saying nothing about that. This me and my own self, right? So I knew at that point I had the authority to what? Take captive that thought and make it align, right? Make it come into alignment with what I knew I needed to do to be at my highest space, my highest thing. I took it captive. Come on, you coming with me? You gonna come on, get in alignment with me, right? And we can do that. We can do that with the fears that come in. We can do that with the self doubt. We can do that with these negative beliefs, right? Right. That often really just come up, you guys, from our past experience, from our social conditioning, and even from our spiritual attacks, you guys. And we can take that stuff and we can bring it captive and bring it in alignment. Okay, with the truth of God, right? With this and bringing an obedience to Christ, to this authority that of God, the God that's within us, right? In all of the truths and promises that He has promised us. All right. So when we let these thoughts run unchecked, you guys, it's kind of like kids. You the adult and these the kids, and we say that with social media. Who the adult here? Or we see these little kids running around, and we like, who the adult, right? That's how we treat our thoughts. You the adult, right? You the authority. You do get to say. And it's like you telling these little kids that don't know anything, I'm, oh, they can just run around. No, we can bring them into alignment. Hey, clap your hand, right? You know, right? So when we let these thoughts run unchecked, you guys, they shape our identity. They keep us trapped in a cycle, right? Of self-doubt, self-sabotage, insecurity, and emotional pain. If that makes sense, put a 7 in the chat, right? If that makes sense, put a 7 in the chat. Now, I do want to say that takes time, and that's okay. And it will trigger some insecurities, and that's okay. And it will trigger some, and we may need someone to hold space for us in that, to believe in us before we believe in ourselves. And that's okay. But I just want you to know that it can be done. If anything, I need you to believe today is that it can be done. That's it. Oh, it can be done. Because a lot of us don't believe, one, that it even can be done. That in some way, that I can't take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. That I don't have the power to do that. That in some way, that's something I pray for God to do. That in some way, that's something that I pray for other people to do for me. And I'm like, no, you can do it. You can do this, right? Okay. And when you know that you can do that, then now the circumstances and the conditions and everything around you starts to shift and move in a way that now the people start to come around you and hold space for you to get you to do that. The encouraging words that you need, that's specific to you, right? Maybe you're a reader, so you will start to go to the bookstore and get the books. And maybe you're a podcast listener, so the right podcast to come along, right? Maybe communities like Project Life will interest you, right? But whatever it is that you need to start to ignite the seeds in you, that thing will start to happen. But you definitely have the ability to take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ, to the Christ in you, okay? To the rules and the laws, right? That has already been established before that thought was even created, okay? All right? Okay. Back here, Sheila. Okay, so we have the power to challenge and redirect our thoughts instead of letting them control us, really. Taking thoughts captive means really pausing, questioning, and really replacing them, right? Replacing them, and replacing these harmful self-talks with really truths, right? With really truths. Instead of saying, I'm not good enough, we know that that is what? Yeah, yeah, you said it. Thank you. Yeah, it's the what? Yeah, when you hear that thing say, I'm not good enough, it's a lie, right? So I can in that same verse say, in that same moment, Let that voice know, no, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Why can I do that? Because the verse just told me that I can take captive every thought and make it obedient to what? To the Christ in me. And I know what? That's what Christ told me, that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. So when this thought come up and say, hey, you're not good enough, I know that that's a lie. I know that's not aligned in truth. No, so I can then declare that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Instead of believing that I always fail, then we can affirm that I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm improving every day, right? So this verse isn't about this distant God really forcing us to change from above, you guys. It's about the power within us, shifting our mindset and aligning with our divine truth. And we know what is our divine truth? That we what? We transcend what? We transcend any limitations. That's what divine means. So God has already given us the ability to what? Discern, to choose, and to reshape our thinking. Healing starts when we actively start to participate in this renewal process. All right. So when this inner critic starts to speak, we pause and we take that thought captive and ask, does it align with the truth of does it align with the truth of God? Does it align with the truth of who God says I am, right? And who God created me to be? If not, I'm going to replace it with the self-validating, self-validation and divine truth. All right. All right. So what's one occurring negative thought that keeps you captive every day? And then I want you to think about a truth that you can replace that with. And again, because it's divine, that belief, we do have to believe it, right? And a big part of the mechanism that God even put in us is our belief system, right? So that's a mechanism, because when I believe it, then it's kind of as if chemically something shifts and moves that I don't have to do anything because I believe that. So much so, you know what I mean? That my ears gonna hear what it should hear, and my eyes gonna look at things that it should see, because this is what I believe. And that's the power of beliefs. Like if I believe that you can't trust people, by design, my ears are gonna listen for the reason not to distrust, look for the thing to not distrust. And that ain't a conscious thing. That's just because I believe I can't trust people, right? So when I start to believe that I can trust, and we know this, right? Women, think about the time that you first met a guy that you really liked and you thought he was everything, and you called your friend, and the only thing you saw was the reasons to like him, right? And guys, think about the time you fell for a girl, right? And you believed she was the one. And what did that allow you to see? Every reason that she was the one. And then what happened? They did something that made you believe what? Different. And when you started to believe different, guess what you started to see? Every reason that they wasn't. It's by design, you guys. It's in us. It's how we were created. That's why this is the power of our beliefs. And we actually thought it was just that other person. No, it's because you changed your beliefs about that other person. That person that you met that was, your husband on day one and became a thorn in your side day 7. That's the same person. It's just your belief on day one was one thing, and then your belief on day 7 was something different, which made you see 2 different people in the same person. And your brain allowed you to do that based off your belief system. And that is how powerful you are. And this is why we really got to understand, what am I believing? What am I believing about myself? What am I believing about my environment? What am I believing about my kids? And what am I believing about this healing process? Because if I'm believing anything other than I have the ability to fully heal and transform my life and become the person that God created me to be, I need to remove those things so that they will not no longer interfere, with my ability to grow. If that makes sense, put an 8 in the chat. I'll drop a heart for me. All right. Our promise verse for today, Timothy 1:7. God has not given us the spirit of fear, you guys, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. Listen, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. So if we take that, guess what? When fear come in, guess what I know I can do? I can take that fear. I can hold it captive, right? When the thoughts of fear come in, I can take it and make it obedient to Christ. And what does that mean? Because I know I was created in what? In power, in love, and with the sound mind. Okay? So the inner critic thrives on fear, you guys. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of unworthiness, right? But God's fear within you is rooted. It's rooted in power, in love, and in clarity, right? All right. So the inner critic thrives on fear, right? On judgment, on us not feeling like we're good enough and being unworthy of love. And guess what? Remember, that was a defense mechanism. It thrived on it to protect us when we were younger, right? That's why it was really developed. Because what? Because we felt that. We felt like we wasn't good enough. We felt like we wasn't important enough by the people who brought us into this world or the environments that cultivated us, right? And the inner critic was there to help us navigate that, right? But as adults now, this is no longer true. You are 100% safe. You're an adult, right? Either at this point in your life, it's the cap. Not the caps like you lying. It's the cap, meaning either you're causing what's happening into your life, you're allowing what's happening into your life, or you participating. And it's okay. If that's a situation you want to be in, that's okay. Right? Right. But as adults, we really need to take responsibility. That's why we're talking about accountability next week as a part of, shaping our life. All right. All right. Because if we don't take accountability, right? And if we don't understand that we are either causing, allowing, and participating, if we don't understand that this inner critic that really was developed as a defense mechanism to really help us manage us, which is what got us here. And we can thank it and we can say, I thank you so much for getting me here, right? That really served as a friend that now is becoming our biggest foe, right? And now we're treating it bad and we're judging ourselves and we don't realize that it's doing that again, for the same reason that it did it before. And we get to change that narrative because the inner critic really thrives on fear and we're going to put ourselves in fearful situations now because we're wanting to change. It thrives on judgment. Guess what? We're going to put ourselves in situations where we're going to get what? Judged, scrutinized, right? It thrives on this feeling of not being good enough. Listen, when I'm being stretched and being vulnerable, guess what? That feeling is going to come up, right? Being unworthy of love. Guess what? Because I'm in this vulnerable place, because I'm shaping my life, because I'm doing stuff, I may need to feel love or I may be the type of person that wants to hear love, right? I know that I'm loved, but I need to be in a community of love, right? So if I don't know some things about me, then this inner critic, right, can really, really halt my healing process, right? But fear is not from God, you guys. But fear is not from God. So this verse really reminds us that God has already placed in us power, right? The ability to overcome limiting beliefs, love, the foundation of self-acceptance and healing, and then a sound mind, right? You guys, the ability to think clearly, to make wise decisions, and to regulate our emotions. Listen, this sound mind that God has placed in us, and we say we don't believe us or we trust in God or we trust in it's like, no, God, see, he placed a sound mind in you. So you can trust you. You can trust you. It say that God, I want to read it again. That for God has not given you a spirit of fear, but he's giving you a spirit of what? Power, a spirit of what? Love, and a spirit of what? A sound mind. What that means is that he's giving you the ability to overcome your limits already. He's giving you the ability, the foundation, right, of acceptance, self-acceptance, and healing, right? Right? And he's giving you the ability to think clearly, to make wise decisions, to regulate your emotions. Okay? We already have this. Okay? And we're asking him to give it to us. And I'm like, hey, this verse, hey, this is a promise from God. We have it. Now, what do we need to do to activate it? All right. So when self-doubt creeps in, we can remind ourselves that this fear is not from God. So I choose power, love, and a sound mind. Instead of letting this inner critic run wild, you guys, we can really anchor ourselves in truth, that we are already equipped to navigate these challenges, trust ourselves, and really move forward in our faith, right? This is not just a motivational verse, you guys. It's a declaration that we are true, a declaration of who we truly are. The same power and love that created the universe. Listen, the same power and love that created the universe, you guys, lives inside of us, right? We don't have to strive for confidence or seek validation. We already have it, okay? And we are already enough, right? So when self-doubt creeps in, shift your mindset. This fear is not from God, right? This was a mechanism, right? This was a mechanism that God placed in me as a guiding post, as a defense mechanism. So maybe it's just here to make me aware, but it's not here to make me move in it. And it's not here to stop me from doing anything. It's probably just here to get me to what? Get present in the moment, breathe, and remind myself, right, that I am powerful, that I am in love, and I do have a sound mind. Because guess what? I probably need to know that for this next moment that I'm going to be faced with. So fear is coming to say, hey, get present. Get present. I need you to get present right now and choose power, love, and a sound mind, because this next situation, you finna have to do that. This next season, you finna have to know this. And maybe that's why fear is there. But when we see fear, guess what we do? We retreat. We let it stop. And maybe it's just the thing that, make you get alert and aware. So, hey, let's breathe with that one. All right. So I want you to, next time fear or self-doubt tries to take over, I want you to remind yourself that, hey, you are made with power, love, and a sound mind. Okay. If that makes sense, put a 9 in the chat for me. If that makes sense, put a 9 in the chat for me, you guys. And remember, this inner critic is not our one. It's not our foe. It was there. It was there. It was there to protect us. It was there to defend us. And a lot of us, if you go back and you remember the first time you heard it, it truly was there to protect you. It truly probably stopped you from getting to a lot of situations when you were little, and it was served as a friend to you before. All right. And the thing that was a friend to you before can't be a foe to you now, right? It cannot be unless you allow it. And so we have to really build a different relationship with it. And if you want to, you already know what to do. Join Project Life, become a member so we can talk about this. All right. So let's get to our transformational tools. So we're going to pause, right? Notice this inner critic, right? Oops. I didn't change it. So we're going to pause. We're going to notice our inner critic, right? Instead of reacting, we're going to challenge it, right? Question, right? Question is true, right? And then we're going to reframe, right? We're going to replace it with self-validation, right? We're going to replace it with self-validation. So when it says that instead of saying I'm not good enough, we're going to say I'm learning and I'm growing every day. Instead of I fail, we're going to say this was a lesson, not a loss. When it says that no one cares what I say, instead of saying no one cares what I say, we're gonna say, listen, I matter. All right, I matter. All right, all right. And then our affirmation for today is I am not my inner critic. I am my healing. Right. I am not my inner critic. I am my healing. Right. I validate myself. I trust myself, and I am more than enough. Right. I am more than enough. All right. And then our daily intention for the day. Remember the affirmation. If we don't believe it, it won't be true. But it is just the language that we're going to use, right? And get used to it. As we say this affirmation, if we feel some resistance, that's the stuff that we probably need to work on. All right. Our daily intention today is today I will validate myself. I will recognize my worth, trust my journey, and remind myself that I am more than enough. All right. I am more than enough. And then our bonus for the next 24 hours, where we can say the next 72 hours, because I won't see you again until Monday. right? Until Monday. So for the next 24 hours, I really just want you to practice the self validation, right? Practice self validation. What does that mean? Listen, just affirm yourself, hear this inner critic when it comes up, build a relationship with it and validate yourself with that knowing that you are built with love, power, the promise. That's a promise. You know what a promise is? That's the promise of God say, if you drop this, guess what? It's gonna fall. The promise of God say you was created with love, power, and a sound mind. So that's the same essence. And if you believe it like you believe that this thing will drop, I promise you that will shift how you look at yourself and the world around you. And with that being said, right, I want you to practice that for the next 72 hours. When this inner critic come up, know that you are built with love, power, and a sound mind. Listen, and with that being said, listen, drop a fire in the chat. Listen, this is self-validation Friday, you guys. Self-validation Friday. Drop a fire in the chat if this session really helped you shift your perspective. And I always want you to remember that if you can shape it, let's celebrate our growth together. Remember that if you can shape it in your mind, you guys, you can have it in your life. Make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel, right? Make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel. Again, invite a friend to the Elevating Life with Sheila Little Facebook group. Thanks for the people who have invited. Again, if you don't know how to invite somebody, just go to your group. It's a invite. Go through your friends list and do that. Yeah. And know that knowledge alone just won't change your life. So I know that a lot of knowledge was dropped today, but it won't change your life. Remember, we got those synapses, right? If we don't do something with this information, talk about it, apply it, right? Make it stick, right? It won't stick. So knowledge alone won't change your life. Action will. So imagine having personalized guidance, real accountability, and a supportive community really to help apply what you learn. And we already know that inside Project Life, you'll get the coaching tools and strategies, right? To really help you move past your obstacles and step fully in your transformation. Your healing journey doesn't have to be a solo mission, you guys. So again, join us for just $47 a month at SheilaLittle.com/life. I love you guys. I love you guys. I thank you so much for being with me this week. We talked about heal, you guys. We talked about the stories we tell ourselves about healing, the triggers that come up from those stories, the obstacles that we have in the healing process, the patterns that we need to break to really help us to heal, in this inner critic that we have to become a friend with on this next journey of healing in our life, you guys. This is all about shaping. Listen, this is all about shaping your life this month. Self-awareness, healing, and next week we're talking about accountability. I look forward to seeing you guys again. I love you. I'll see you on Monday. Till later.